Hello, welcome back to my channel. This is Rosie Rose Reads. I am Rosie and I am reading, and today I have for you my August monthly wrap up. I feel like I say this every month, but like seriously, we're headed into the next month, which is September, which is the Burr months, which are my favorite. So I'm very excited about that, but I cannot believe it. At the same time, August felt so long. I was like getting together these books to talk about that I read in August, and I was like, seriously, I read this month? Like, it seems like I read that forever ago. So I had to refresh my memory on a few of them to chat with you all about them today. So as always, like and subscribe if you haven't, and let's jump right into it because I read 16 books this month and I DNF'd one. So let's chat. Okie doke. So the first thing that counted as read this month, we finished it this month, but we didn't like read the whole of it, is the tandem read of Empire of Storm and Tower of Dawn by Sarah J. Maas. My husband and I are listening to the audio versions of these, and we did tandem read these at the same time. If you're interested in doing the tandem read, I highly recommend it. It is now my second time doing the tandem read, and I don't think these books would hit the same way without it. You can look up a guide online about like when to switch chapters. I just had to pay a little bit of attention during the audio version, but it was really enjoyable. Doing the tandem read, I love these two together. I'm a Tower of Dawn girly. Some people hate Tower of Dawn, but like the character growth, so good. So again, we did not do all of this in August, but we finished it at the beginning of this month, so it counts on the August TBR. So we did those. 5 stars. So the next book that I read was a book off of my August TBR. I picked 10 books for my August TBR and I read 5 of them and DNF'd one. I don't normally like do that much off my TBR, so I was excited about that. But the book was Well Matched by Jen DeLuca, and this is the third in this interconnected, they're all standalones, but they are interconnected. I would recommend reading them in order so as you like to avoid spoilers of which couples are together. When I filmed my August TBR, I was about 75% of the way through this one, so I knew it was going to be on the August books, but I included it and I was excited about that. Well Matched follows April and Mitch, and April is the sister of our protagonist in the first book, whose name I am totally forgetting. So this one was super fun and cute, a quick read. I am vamping up to go to the Renaissance Fest. I think I'm gonna do a Renfest vlog. It's not technically books, but my Renfest has a little bookstore, and I actually met Jen DeLuca there last year and she signed these books for me. I was there on my bachelorette party, so she said happy wedding. So these books are super special to me, and I read this one to vamp up for Renfest. I have one more that I haven't met, the fourth one that I haven't read yet, the fourth one. So I might read that in early September right before we go to Renfest. But yes, after Well Matched, I attempted to read Family Lore by Elizabeth Acevedo, which was on my August TBR, and I was really excited for that book. I adored The Poet X by Elizabeth Acevedo, and I'm a big fan of her work. She is the audiobook narrator for her books as well, which I usually absolutely eat up. And I actually had tickets to go see Elizabeth Acevedo and Clint Smith, who's one of my favorite historians, speak. Clint Smith is also a poet, so that's why he was on that panel. And I couldn't go because I was feeling under the weather. So I tried to give Family Lore a read, and I was reading the audio version. And Family Lore follows the like matriarchal follows a family, and it follows the story of the various women in the family. So sisters, aunts, grandmothers, all interconnected, and multi-generational. And I was having a really hard time listening to the audiobook version because we were jumping between narrators and we were also jumping around in time. And I was just having a really hard time connecting with which each character was and what their individual story was. So I did DNF it for now. I do want to go back to the story when I have the physical copy, because I think it will be a little bit easier for me to follow, but I did give it a go. I think I DNF'd it around 17 or 20%. The premise is really interesting. One of the women in the family has like a kind of sense about when people are gonna die. She sees it in her dreams, and she has a dream that she's gonna die, so she plans her funeral ahead of that. And it kind of all revolves around that. So it sounds super interesting. I do really want to go back to it. I've seen lots of praise for it. Just the audio version was not working for me at the time that I was trying to listen to it. The next book that I read, which was also on my August TBR, was Love Theoretically by Ali Hazelwood. And this book follows Elsie, who is a physicist and an adjunct professor. And she, because adjuncting is hard and doesn't always support adjunct professors financially the way it's supposed to, she is a like fake dating subscription girlfriend where people can pay to go on a date with her. And she has one client who she really likes as a friend, so she goes on multiple dates, and she sees his brother Jack on these dates. And she doesn't put two and two together, but when she goes for a job interview at MIT for a tenured position, Jack is one of the physicists there. And of course, Jack doesn't know what Elsie actually does, her real name, who she is. So there is a bit of confusion and whatnot, and kind of enemies to lovers. Like, she doesn't think Jack likes her. She doesn't like Jack for certain reasons in the physicist world. And I just ate this up. I absolutely loved it. I thought it was my, like, after I finished it, I was like, I think that is my favorite Ali Hazelwood book. And to test this hypothesis, this theory, I decided that I needed to reread Ali Hazelwood's other two books to see if it was in fact true. So I rated Love Theoretically like 4.5 stars. And then I went back and read The Love Hypothesis and Love on the Brain. And I think my definitive ranking is Love Theoretically as my favorite, The Love Hypothesis as my second favorite, and Love on the Brain as my third favorite. Every time I read The Love Hypothesis, I dislike An, who's the best friend. I dislike her more and more. And she really takes away from the story because she just puts Olive in these situations that are so not okay, even for your friend. And especially in like the place that you're going to school, even if they weren't fake dating. And I don't like that. So every time I read it, I kind of dislike that more and more. And this was like my second or third reread. And then this was my first reread of Love on the Brain. I really enjoyed this the first time I read it. The second time around, I thought B was a little bit too much like, I'm not like other girls, I'm quirky, which she is, and that's great, but it kind of got a little bit annoying at times. And I didn't feel the setup and the tension as much with these two characters as I did with these characters. But I really enjoyed Love Theoretically, and it was very steamy, so keep that in mind if you want to read it. I will be rereading this when I need a pick-me-up because it was so fun. So after those three, and again, like, I read multiple books all at the same time, so these are just the order that I finished them in, but I was reading at the same time. But I finished The Empire of Gold by S.A. Chakraborty, which is the third and final installment in the Devabad trilogy. And if you watched my July wrap up, I was living for this series. I was so in it. I was obsessed with it. The first two just were incredible, and this third and final book delivered. It was so good. I have since I finished this book, I have actively found myself missing these characters because the world that we were they're big books. So we spent a lot of time with our main characters and the growth that they underwent, the trials, the tribulations, seeing them come out on top, seeing them change and evolve. I just absolutely loved and cared for these characters like they were my own friends. And I actually found myself missing them when I finished this book, wishing I could read more of their story. I know that there is kind of a collection of non-main character stories that took place in the same world, and I haven't picked it up yet, but I definitely will be. I saw it at the bookstore, but I wanted to pick up the paperback to match my collection. Yeah, but I was just blown away by S.A. Chakraborty. Now she writes under the name Shannon Chakraborty. I was blown away by her ability to connect all of these world building points that she had been weaving into the story, and I didn't think were going to come up later. I thought she was just making a really robust world. She was providing some lore, some background to feel like she had really thought out the world. And then when they all started to connect in this book, I was amazed. So good. So good. Also, the tension and the little bit of romance that there was in this, I just clung to. I cannot recommend this trilogy enough if you want a high fantasy, political fantasy trilogy. This is it. Please pick up the Devabad trilogy. Again, this starts with the City of Brass, and then, oh my gosh, why can I not think of... Oh, The Kingdom of Copper is book 2. So the City of Brass, The Kingdom of Copper, and then The Empire of Gold. So good. So good. I love them. So after The Empire of Gold, I picked up another book off of my August TBR, and that was Divine Rivals by Rebecca Ross. If you watched my June and July monthly wrap-up videos, I recently read the Elements of Cadence duology by Rebecca Ross, which was A River Enchanted and A Fire Endless, and I absolutely loved them. They still are topping my favorite fantasy duology list, favorite book list. I seriously adored them so much. So I did have high hopes for Divine Rivals, especially seeing how much it was blowing up on TikTok and Book Talk and BookTube, how much it was blowing up. Everybody was loving it. Everybody was reading it. I was super excited to read it. I had really high hopes. I did enjoy it, but it didn't top A River Enchanted and A Fire Endless for me. It is the first in a duology, so I'm interested to see if book 2, Ruthless Vow, which comes out later this year, if book 2 ties it all together and brings it up to Elements of Cadence for me. But right now, Elements of Cadence is still holding the top spot in my heart. But if you are not familiar with Divine Rivals, the premise is that two journalists, Iris and Roman, or Kit, his name is Roman Kit, but she calls him Kit, basically. Two journalists are rivals and then slowly find out that they are actually writing letters to each other through an enchanted typewriter. And then they go to be war correspondents, and in this fantasy magical realism land that they're living in, there's a war amongst gods. It feels very kind of British World War II, if you can put yourself there, but with a little fantasy element. Anyway, these two journalists go to war to be war correspondents, and it is their story of rivalry, friendship, romance connection. It did leave off on a big cliffhanger, so I am interested in picking up book 2 along with everybody else. Yeah, so this one I think I gave 4 stars. Again, I don't know if it was because I had just come off of an epic 5-star read. I don't know if it was because I loved Rebecca Ross's other books so much. I did enjoy it. It just wasn't a 5-star for me, unfortunately. But I am going to pick up book 2. So after Divine Rivals, I was feeling like I needed something fun. I needed something quick and kind of just easy to breeze through. And I was in luck because on my Libby, here came my hold for That Time I Got Drunk and Yeeted a Love Potion at a Werewolf by Kimberly Lemming. And this is the second book in the Mead Mishaps series. And Kimberly Lemming's books, these books are just so fun. They're so cute and quirky. They're like cozy, steamy fantasy rom-coms. They are just so funny. I was constantly laughing out loud while reading these. So I read book 2. I gave it a 4 stars. I have never been a huge fan of shifter romances, which are like werewolf romances. I've read some shifter fanfics and they've never been like my exact thing. So it wasn't a 5-star for me. It was a 4-star, but overall I really enjoyed it. Actually later in the month, I should just talk about it now, but my last book of August was That Time I Got Drunk and Saved a Human, which was book 3, which I rated like 4.5 stars. I think Cherry in book 3 was my favorite main woman protagonist that we got. She was just so funny and I really enjoyed that book. So book 3, I think book 1 and book 3 are tied for my favorite. Book 2 was a little bit less for me because the shifter thing's not my favorite, but I just cannot recommend this series enough if you need something like quick, light, steamy, fantasy, funny, so good. On the opposite end of quick, light, steamy, but still fantasy is One Dark Window by Rachel Gillig, which I picked up, which again, the sequel also comes out later this year, so I'm super excited about. And I cannot stop thinking about the magic system in this book. It was so interesting. This is another one that has been talked about all over the internet recently. I do recommend going into this one pretty blind, but what I will say is that Elspeth lives in a world where a sickness can overtake you and then leave you with, if you survive the illness, you are left with magic. Those people are hunted down. That happens to her, but she goes into hiding. And the only way that magic is allowed in this world is if you're using a Providence card. So when Elspeth goes back to court, she finds herself with some unlikely allies and new tasks. Like I said, it's good to go into it blind, but there is magic, and the Providence card magic system was just so intriguing to me. And like I said, I have been thinking about it and like trying to talk to my husband about it, and like I want him to read it so we can chat about it. Yeah, I really enjoyed this one. I did give it 4.5 because it posits a certain trope, enemies to lovers, and there wasn't quite enough pining for me. I wanted there to be more pining, more tension, more like I wanted just a little bit more for it to be a 5-star read, but I'm so excited to see how the next one turns out when it comes out in October. So I will be reading that for sure. This one was also on my August TBR, so yay. So after One Dark Window, I read The Ghosts of Rose Hill by R.M. Romero, and this is a prose novel, and I did listen to the audio version, so I didn't see the prose, and listening to the audio version, it did sound very much like just a normal novel. So I think if you want the prose, novel experience. You definitely should read the physical copy. If you are just interested in the story, you can do the audio version like I did. But this story follows a young girl who is Jewish and Cuban, and she goes to visit her aunt in Prague, and there she comes across a Jewish cemetery, and she can see ghosts and finds herself in a new situation with these ghosts and discovering her own Jewish identity and like really embracing what that means, and multiculturalness. It was a really interesting and thought-provoking read. It was YA. Overall, I enjoyed it. I gave it a 4-star. Yeah, I hadn't seen it talked about a lot, but I saw it and I thought it sounded interesting, and I am glad that I read it. So that was a quick read. The audiobook was only about 4 hours, so it was a super quick read in one afternoon. After that, I did it. You guys, I did it. I read Babble. If you've been watching my monthly TBRs, Babble has been on it. My mid-year wrap-up, Babble was the book that I needed to read in 2023. Basically, since I started this channel, I've been talking about how I need to read Babble, but I didn't want to get into it because it's pretty big. It was intimidating. I wasn't sure I was like ready to do it yet. I felt like I needed to tab it if I was going to do it. The stars aligned that I have the physical copy. I got the Libby loan of the ebook copy on my Kindle, and I have Scribd, and the Babble audio version is on Scribd. So the stars aligned that I had all 3 formats, and I powered through this. I read it in about a week. I did tab it and annotate it with various tabs. So Babble. Let's chat about it now that I read it. I'm just proud of myself for reading it. Let's chat about it. Babble follows Robin, who is picked up by a professor in Canton after his mother passes away. He is saved from the influenza that his mother dies from, and he is taken to England. The professor kind of raises him loosely. He's not a father figure, he's just overseeing him, and he like primes him to go to Oxford to work in the Babble Translation Center, and this takes place in about 1830. And it's an arcane history, so it is a history of Oxford. It reads very much like a historical fiction, but there is a tiny touch of magic in this book, and that is translation and silver working, and magic is fueled by translation. So my thoughts on this book are that this book does a wonderful job of showing colonialism and the repercussions of colonialism and the world of academia, and how academia and language play into colonialism, how racism is perpetuated in academia, the microaggressions and macroaggressions, honestly, that people of color in predominantly white institutions, like something like Oxford, any higher education institution, let's be real, face. That all came across, and that all was super clear. This book to me was not very nuanced. This book was like, that is what this book was about, and the book told you that was what it was about. And it's important, and people should read about it, and people should understand. And it made for an intriguing read. It just wasn't very nuanced. In my opinion, my thoughts on this also are that silver in this, which again is like fueled by translation and is the magical element, Silver honestly could have been subbed for any other commodity, and in history, like, would have been subbed for any other commodity, whether it was tea or sugar or wood or mahogany or all of these different commodities that fueled colonialism in the 1800s. So even though silver was the magic piece, it could have been subbed for any commodity, and the book, to me, would have felt the same. I just wanted a little bit more from the magic. I wanted Kwong to think through, like, if there was magic in the world, I feel like the characters would have acted a certain way. I was interested in how magic influenced the rest of the world and the rest of the characters and their motivation beyond just being another commodity or being another means to an end, if that makes sense. Yeah, overall it was like a 4.5 read. I really enjoyed it. It was emotional. It was a lot. The other thing I really wanted was, I was so interested in Robin's friends and their backstories, and when we got little sprinkles of them, I ate those sprinkles up. I was so interested in them, and I really wanted just a little bit more of that woven throughout the story rather than just in the interludes that we got it. But I don't want to be too harsh. Like, again, I loved this book. I think when a book gets this big, there's gonna be critiques that every person has, and I think that's like a great part of reading in a community. Yeah, I can't wait to pick up the rest of R.F. Kuang's work because I am so interested to read both the Poppy War trilogy and Yellowface, and I am so glad that I read Babble and can participate in conversations about it now and listen to what other people are thinking and learn from other people and what they took away from the book. For sure, definitely worth reading if you have not read it yet. After Babble, I also needed something light, so I picked up Funny Feelings by Tara DeWitt, and Funny Feelings follows Farley, who is a comedian, and her manager, Meyer, who was a former comedian, is now a single dad and manages Farley and their friendship and relationship. There is a little bit of fake dating, a little bit of kind of like Hollywood, the comedian scene. It was pretty funny. It was a light romance, like a light and easy romance read. There was some steam. It wasn't anything that's like gonna stick with me forever or be one of my top favorites. So because of that, I gave it about 3.5 stars. But I would recommend it, especially if you enjoy comedy. It definitely like made me want to watch stand-up comedians, which then we watched John Mulaney's Baby J, which was so funny. So it definitely like got me in the mood for comedy, which I needed a little bit of this month. So I really enjoyed that aspect of it. After Funny Feelings, I read The Island of Sea Women by Lisa C., which was on my August TBR and was loaned to me by a friend who thought I would enjoy it. I gave this book about 3.5, 4 stars. I think part of that was I was a mood reader and I wasn't necessarily in the mood for another historical fiction after I read Babble, which again felt like a historical fiction. But I did give this a go, and this follows the Hanyeo women on the island of Jeju in Korea, and this spans from about 1930 to present day, and it's a matriarchal society of women divers who deep dive in the sea and free dive and collect things like abalone and fish and flora to feed their community and sell to support themselves. And it follows like the Japanese occupation of Korea leading up to World War II, and then the American occupation of Korea following World War II, and then the Korean War. I will say, please read the trigger warnings for this book. I did not expect it to be as graphic and as heavy as it ended up being, but it was about friendship and like what it means to be a woman under various circumstances. And overall, I did really enjoy it. I almost DNF'd it, and I'm glad that I didn't, because I did enjoy it. I did learn a lot about this community and this history, which I didn't know a lot about. Lisa C. in her acknowledgments talks about all of the various people that she met and research that she did and research trips that she took to the island, and living active members of this community of divers who she spoke with and interviewed. So a lot of research went into this book, and I learned a lot, but it was heavy and sad in a way that I was not expecting. So yes, but I think I gave it a 3.75 4-star. So after the Island of the Sea Woman, for some reason, I decided that I should in fact pick up another like emotional, heavy, graphic historical fiction book. So I read Kindred by Octavia E. Butler, which is science fiction because there is time travel. And this follows Dana, a young African-American woman living in 1976, and on her 26th birthday, she suddenly is transported back in time to a plantation in the 1800s in Maryland, and there she is forced into a situation where she has to save a young white boy named Rufus. And she then time travels back to her own life and her husband, another white man named Kevin. And this time travel occurs multiple times throughout about 3 weeks in Dana's real life, but multiple points in the first 20 years of Rufus's life. There are strong and graphic depictions of slavery and the violence that enslaved individuals were subjected to during this time. It was graphic and it was hard to read. I did give this book a 5-star despite all of that, because I've been trying for days to put in to verbalize what this book did. But I think what it comes down to is this book encapsulated so much hope that with Dana's knowledge of the future, of how history would play out, and her ability to interact with Rufus as he was growing up, there was so much hope that she would be able to counteract the pervasive racism and, perpetuation of slavery and ideology that was encompassed at the time, that she would be able to counteract that. She would be able to educate him, to teach him empathy, to convey in him that Black people are human beings and are not his property as the young, coming up owner of this plantation. And there was so much hope and so much emotion that Dana had for herself, that Kevin, her husband, had for her, that was encompassed in this book. And I wanted that to be true. I think every reader wants it to be true. I think Octavia Butler's writing just makes you think it's gonna happen. And then spoilers, it doesn't. And it just is completely shattering to see that in fact racism and these ideas were so pervasive that even a supernatural science fiction element like time travel, somebody knowing what happens and coming back and having all of the facts and the way that history plays out, bringing literature, history books with her back to this time, even that wasn't enough. It just was honestly so heartbreaking and so well written. This book was just phenomenal. The writing didn't feel that inaccessible in any way, but when you closed the book, it just like left you with this huge heartache. And like, I just, yeah, it was so good. You should read it. If you haven't read it, you should read it. You should read the trigger warnings, know what you're getting into, but you should read it. I am so interested in picking up Octavia Butler's other books. I know she's just a prolific writer, was a prolific writer. She has since passed. Yeah, I can't wait to pick up her other works because this one was phenomenal and hard, but yeah. So again, after Kindred, I did read That Time I Got Drunk and Saved a Human, so I had something light to pick me up. I'm in the middle of 2 or 3 books right now, but that is 16 books. That is all of the books that I read in August. It was a lot. So I am going to wrap the vlog up here. That is it for me today. And until we meet again, I hope you have a 5-star read. Thanks. Bye.